Welcome residents of the village of Hazel, Crest, and friends. I'm President Bernard Alsbury Jr. From the village of Hazel, Crest. And today we're going to have a discussion on safety in the house of worship. Our police chief, Mr. Mitchell Davis, and local clergy will be discussing the safety in the house of worship and how we should react and act to deal with this crisis that's happening throughout America. So I'm bringing to you today local clergy and again our police chief, Mr. Mitchell Davis, to discuss those issues and so you can have some insight on how we become safer in the house of worship.
Gwen Gray back again with another edition of Let's Talk. Welcome back, Hazel Crest residents. This is a special edition of Let's Talk in light of the church shootings that have happened last year in Charleston and actually just a few weeks ago down in Texas. We wanted to put together a panel discussion to discuss these church shootings, what has happened, why it has happened, and how we can address people or members of the faith. We have with us a wonderful panel today, and we're going to, bandy about, ask a few questions of each of you. So I'd like to first start out and ask each one of you to go around the table, tell us who you are, tell us what church entity you represent, and maybe why you're here.
My name is Elaine Belanda. I'm from St. Anne Catholic Church in Hazel Crest, and I'm Father Ralph's pastoral assistant.
Hi, I'm Elder Robert Arnold. I'm from Living to Live Again International Ministries here in Hazel Crest.
Wonderful.
I'm Mitchell Davis. I'm the police chief here in the village of Hazel Crest.
Pastor Barbara Alexander, Senior Pastor of River of Life Kingdom Ministries in Hazel Crest.
Pastor Michael Rule from Agape Ministries in Hazel Crest.
Chief, why don't we start with you? Tell us about the initiatives that you have in mind to address this ever-growing problem, I guess.
And it's sad with recent things that have happened. This is not a reactionary thing. As you said, we already had some things in place because, it's just a sad state of affairs that we have to be cautious in all settings now. And it's been that way for some time. And, we can't try to figure out why people are doing things. I always say you can't try to rationalize irrational behavior. Right. So, we had already planned on trying to put together an active shooter training for churches. And what we're going to do is we're going to make it a collective effort, not just for Hazel Crest, but for the entire Chicagoland area, and ask for leaders from respective congregations and churches to come out and to give them some fundamental things on active shooter training. And then we would send them back into their communities, and then their respective police departments could give them specifics as it pertains to their churches and directly.
Wonderful. Okay, good. Wonderful. Now, Pastor Alexander, we all know that church hours are the most segregated times of the week. Okay, that creates unintentionally, it creates an opportunistic time for hate crime.
Certainly.
Can you talk about that? There's a lot of effort that goes into, getting people to come to church in the first place. So even without this, but now with this, do you think enough thought goes into the safety aspect of church attending?
Possibly not prior to the last events that we've seen.
Okay.
And I think as pastors that we have to ensure that what we present to our congregations and those who are in attendance is clearly not segregation.
Okay.
That the kingdom of God is all inclusive. It is not an exclusive club. So what we teach to the people has to ensure that they have a love for all people. However, there are people who have issues that are not related to their religion or anything else.
Okay.
Oftentimes we'll see that when you see these kinds of events happen, that there's mental illness involved. So we do have some security procedures available in our local ministry. However, we don't have armed security. We don't have security, in uniform in the parking lot or anything like that. But we have enhanced and tightened our security measures. We've added monitors for the parking lots at all times. Somebody sitting, one of the men in the ministry monitoring, and we've determined that now we're going to start locking our door at a certain time as well. And so we do have some procedures in place, and I would think that most churches probably are looking at the same thing.
Okay. Pastor Rule, with everything that's going on, and I guess, we can give certain seriousness levels to what happened. Do you think that we don't hear enough about what goes on, in the church, not just shootings, but, confrontations, things like that? Are you surprised by that, or?
I would I wouldn't say surprised. I'm just concerned, more so why a lot of this is happening within the churches. However, considering what we do, um, we solicit interests of the common man in retrospect to there are all kind of crises within the communities. You don't know what's on people's minds, what they're thinking. Being a pastor, I try to advocate, righteous living. However, we have to also consider the common man's thinking. And so with that being said, I'm really concerned, really now more so than ever, where people don't have allow me to say respect or regards to the house of God. It's like the common man comes in, basically, we don't know what they're thinking. We're preaching to the lost, but again, there are issues with people that have domestic issues or just angry about certain things that we're not able to penetrate through the gospel. And so I just am very, very concerned. I don't think it's so much is that the information is not coming out of the church. I think we as ministers have to address and think about the common man's thinking and interest when we're preaching to our congregations, because we don't know what we're dealing with, at a given time.
Okay. Now, historically speaking, church, of course, has always been a refuge, a place of refuge. Ironically enough, and this is in a negative light, the shootings in Charleston last year was at a church that was actually where they met to talk about escaping slavery, part of the Underground Railroad, all of that wonderful stuff. And it was a place where people could go, be safe, feel safe, and discuss secret things, if you would. Now, of course, we know times have changed as we've moved on through the centuries. But what has changed in terms of trying to address those societal ills? So what do we do? How do we do that? How do we make them revere, once again, the house of God?
Oh, it's interesting that you said that, because to me, it's the method in which we do things. There was a time where the people had allowed me to say interest in righteous living. They came to church for help. They were seeking salvation through Jesus Christ. Now you find people that are coming in and they're wandering and they're thinking. You don't know who's who. The difference from then was the preacher was preaching directly to the soul. Now I got to watch. The Bible tells us to watch and pray. So now we're all sitting here talking about something that I personally have been confronted with the members saying, Pastor, I know we're here for revival, restoring of the soul, but what about our safety? Which is totally different from yesterday. So now I gotta say, you're absolutely correct. So there's gotta be different methods, there have to be different approaches. But I believe it's gotten everybody's attention now, in regards to, I got my Bible, but I'm also watching what's going on around me as well.
Absolutely.
Watch as well as pray, I guess.
Yes,
That's right.
Okay. Chief, would you recommend to any of the pastors, if service starts at noon, would you recommend that they lock their doors 12:15?
I don't know that I would recommend locking doors, but I would recommend controlling how people can actually enter your church.
Okay.
So not locking all the doors, but limiting where people can come in and actually leave, and have people in place to monitor those. And you have to have systems in place, even if because every church can't afford to pay a police officer or somebody to sit there. And, but every church has members, and you talk about serving. Serving can be, like I just heard a pastor say a minute ago that they got some of the men. In my church, we have some of the brothers that stay at the front door throughout the entire service. A couple of them will go outside. They'll make sure that they walk everybody to and from their vehicles. While I'm in service, I discuss different things with my pastor, that we do. There's some security things that you want to keep. You don't want to expose everything that you do, but there's certain things that we do within our church to try to monitor, because There's people who will come in for the wrong reasons, and there are
Yeah.
people who may come into your church and disrupt things just to see who security is,
Exactly.
who's going to respond. So you have to take all those things into account. So one thing that I would suggest is that they have somebody sit down with them and look. If they have a plan, let's review the plan. If you don't have a plan, well, let's come up with a fundamental plan. So if something does happen, we at least got something in place. So we can
Exactly.
respond.
Exactly.
We know that marriage counseling exists prior to the marriage. And then more often than not, marriages in the church do end. Sometimes there are children involved. They see each other in church each week. Ex-spouses still go to the same church. Do you think, Pastor Arnold or Elder Arnold, there should be mechanisms in place that deal with the separation or the divorce aspect of that?
I do. I believe that is something that is vital in the community because when you think about the church is a refuge. And counseling has always been a foundation of the church. You have people that are dealing with economic, social injustices. You have domestic violence. And when the church is not there to provide services, then the people have no place to go. Some people can't afford the insurance that is needed to get the counseling that's required. I strongly believe that the church has the power and the mechanisms to put into place counseling programs, things that would be a deterrent. But we have to be part of the community. We can't show up on Sundays and not show up again into the following Sunday.
Okay.
But I think as the other pastors have spoken out earlier, we are a strong force in the community. And many families go through dysfunctional activities, whether it be drug activities, whether it be an absentee parent. It's not necessarily a father this time in what we live in. It could be a mother that could be absent at times. And all of these things have effect on the entire household.
Yes. We are in a technological age. Everybody's coming to church with electronic devices, with telephones. We access our word from our phones and things like that. Do you think that the church should have some sort of metal detectors or what have you for people to walk through as they come to worship?
That is such it's a real hard issue for me because I believe in God, I believe in faith, I believe in God's protection. And so when you say metal detectors to come into the church, that just makes me feel like, oh my goodness, where is our faith? It may be something that we have to look at in the future. I don't think that's something that I would consider right now. Because like you said earlier in that survey that man said from CNA, it's few and far between, but it's very high profile. So I don't think that something like that is, at least in my church, we all know each other. We know when there's a stranger coming in. We know that. We have ushers at the front door. When somebody comes in, we have greeters, and we all know who they are. If we don't know who they are, we ask them their name and everything. So it's not something that would benefit my church, in particular. So I just don't like the idea of metal detectors, and at this point in time, I don't think it's something that we need, but. Might be something, but we're a small church.
Okay.
We're only 300 families, and we know everybody, so so it might be different in some, a bigger church.
Understood. Anyone at the table a proponent of gun laws? I guess from the aspect of church members being able to protect themselves.
Our cardinal came out with a directive that said absolutely no guns in the church.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You were talking about some hesitancy about metal detectors, but I've noted in churches that I visited, we're small churches as well, but some larger churches, they had those signs posted on the doors. No, the circle with the slashing and no guns allowed, no weapons allowed. And so, not that would deter somebody who's going to commit that kind of crime. However, in order to exercise some restraint from metal detectors, because we're a refuge. I mean, there are people who are hurting that carry guns. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to hurt somebody else in the church, but they need to be in the church. I mean, really, that's where the turnaround is, I know secular programs, there are secular programs out there, there are community-based agencies, social agencies that are established to help the community, but there is a significant difference in helping somebody change their heart and their minds versus teaching them some coping mechanisms, because there could be the one trigger that you were not able to teach them to, cope with. And when a person comes to Christ, it's a change of their heart. Now you've got to get their mind transformed and renewed so that they can learn how to live and apply the principles of the Word of God, and it works. It does work.
The challenge also with weapons, speaking about gun control in the church, the challenge is most people, even people who are legally carrying weapons, they have their concealed carry. They're not trained because, and the unique thing about church shootings is there's always a crowd there.
True.
It's not a one-on-one thing. And if you're not trained in don't shoot situations, and all you know is I can legally carry this weapon, and somebody comes in here and I'm shooting towards this offender, but I'm not taking into consideration that there's 50 people behind them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't understand the dynamics of projectiles and how they, the difference between cover and concealment. Those are all trained things. So, there's a lot of factors that come into play with this whole process. That's why, leaders of churches have to think about this beforehand and talk to their congregation about it and lay down the rules that, hey, this is what we're going to accept as a church, and this is what we're not going to accept. Now, whatever that process might be, I don't know what that is, but that discussion needs to happen beforehand.
Okay.
Well, I have a whole different angle at this, but I think it's appropriate. Yeah, we have the sign that says firearms, but I have law enforcement officers that are members of my congregation. And so that's something that I don't allow me to say openly advocate, but I've had discussions with, the people that are trained, and I encourage that to a certain degree, from the perspective of if something happens, I'm gonna call the police. And so in that regard, I tell just allow me to say certain individuals, hey, I have one of the state troopers at the church. He comes to church for service, runs out, going to work, And so I don't openly advocate it, but I'm concerned, in regards to, now, the concern I have is that people with wicked and unrighteous thoughts, they know what they're doing and the intent that they have, we seek the righteous, we seek to give the plan of salvation to people, but the enemy's gonna come in the room. And so for that reason, I say, I think it's appropriate, as long as I agree with you, Chief, the law enforcement officers, and they know and they're trained what to do. And we have those meetings to discuss what if, what do we do?
But wouldn't that require you to have those individuals that are members of your church, that are members of law enforcement, to be on a schedule? Because somebody could not be there any given Sunday, and you still would not have that. You know what I mean?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, there's kind of two different ways that works. If you can afford to pay people, because I know people who are in churches that I have members that they pay to I need you to be here, so I'm gonna pay you whatever to be here. But then in my church, we have, there's no schedule. But just as pastor has done, our pastor has spoken with those of us that are members of law enforcement. And, we amongst ourselves, that these are the things that, the what ifs, but when we go through those what ifs. So you go through that. And one thing that everybody needs to be clear on is when you see those signs with the gun, that doesn't pertain to law enforcement. That pertains to concealed carry people. And that's something that they learn in the class, that if that's posted somewhere, that your stuff is null and void there. So law enforcement still would be able to steal.
Absolutely. And it's almost like we are reacting, and honestly, forgetting to pray.
Absolutely.
Because that power that we believe in the first place, and the reason why we're there, the reason why we do worship.
Exactly.
We can't, I believe, lose focus.
No.
That was one of my first reactions was, well, let's not join everybody in being so afraid. We know, our cardinals, and I really believe this, they said, we have to work for gun control. We won't stop everybody, but we'll stop some. We've got to work for mental illness, treatment for drug addicts, mental illness. We've got to be able to recognize that in our own congregation and get them help. We won't save everybody, but we'll save some.
Absolutely.
So I think that's, we have to start looking more at, at our congregations. That's who we have control over to a certain extent, and they're there. So we have to listen to them and be able to detect that ourselves, and then get them the help that they need, or channel them to the help that they can get. Rather than, this knee-jerk reaction, okay, now we're gonna have guns, now we're gonna have this, I really think we have to be more, we have to be deeper in our faith and in our belief in God.
And I think as leaders of the flocks, there's a responsibility there, and from a spiritual level, but also at a reality level, in which they are the same for those of us who do believe. But at the same time, I'm by no means, I believe that this stuff should occur at a level that most of your people in your congregation never know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Only those people that are in the know would even know that this stuff is so. So I agree with you 100%. And the faith has to be there, but the reality of it is we're not going to stop everybody, and we can't determine when we're not going to do that.
That's right.
So to have it at a level where it's not offensive to people, and they don't even know that it's going on.
Okay.
I would say that in respect to what everyone has said, we need to be more proactive than reactive. As you said, we tend to wait till something happens and say, well, let's put this in place. But we have to understand that it's already there, and we have to prepare our congregation in the sense that we're, as you said, we're over this, we're the shepherds of the flock. We have to prepare ourselves to protect them. When they're there on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night Bible study, wherever it may be, they're under our watch.
Absolutely.
And it's our responsibility to ensure their safety under our watch.
Absolutely.
And if we're going to be more proactive, then we need to meet with people, as you all have said, that can be there, and folks that can be the eyes in the sky for us, so to speak, without everyone else being alert and nervous.
It's a delicate balance.
It's a delicate balance.
It really is.
But the house of worship is a place where you should come and be comfortable. You should feel at ease.
Always.
You should come get relief. If you sit there and you're so concerned about what's going on around you, you're not receiving what you come to receive.
Absolutely.
And if we continue to be more proactive and put measures in place that will ease the tensions, then a lot of times we can take the mindset of those who are entering our church, because I've had an experience. I've had an individual enter my service, and he sat there and he cried. And he cried the whole service, but something wasn't right about it. And after the service, I walked over to him. I said, I want you to step outside with me. And he stepped outside with me, and he told me what his intentions were. It wasn't any intentions on the church. It was his intentions, what he's going to do after church. But he said, because I was here, you eased my mind. And as you all say, if you can reach the mind, you'll reach the soul. And we have to be proactive and be able to, sometimes we have to be able to see these signs. And training is one of the most vital things that we can ever receive, to see certain signs and symptoms of what's going on.
Or discernment.
Discernment is always there. Oh yeah, that's always there.
Well, that's very good. That's very good what you're saying, because that happened to me several times. We have our Bible studies and open to the public, and people have walked in. Absolutely. Same scenario. I had a guy come in. He seemed distraught. I was talking to him, and of course, me sitting where I sit, I could kind of see what's going on, and I kind of felt discernment that there's something here. And the guy was contemplating on going home and committing suicide. So we don't know, what and you're absolutely right. And so what I had to do at that point is shift, and I did, because a lot of times I believe we all, and I tell our church this all the time, we're a domestic service center. There's so many issues out here that needs to be addressed and people that need, and we serve God's hurting people.
Yes.
And sometimes the mindset, psychologically, we don't know how this is going, but we have to pray.
Yeah.
We have to ask God,
I agree.
and that's where I am, But in the same interim, I totally agree. We gotta accept the reality, Chief. You're absolutely right.
Wonderful.
We also don't want to make sure that and I know it doesn't happen in any of you all's churches, but in some churches I hear that there are some folks that run folks away from church. Because my pastor said they're too religious for their own heavenly good. And we don't want to equip those people to think, because once again, those people in need are the people that we're supposed to be serving. That's what the Lord, and so we can't be, judging folks, having biases and things like that, and once again, equipping those folks in those other churches that may actually not receive.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I think this has been a wonderful, wonderful panel discussion. And one last question for the pastors and the elder. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you could do it very briefly. Are you ever concerned as you're in the pulpit ministering and you see people moving about the sanctuary and you really don't know what's going on?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Pastor Alexander?
I'd say yes. And actually had an occasion where I had one of the grandbabies and we're praising and worshiping, and I don't sit in the pulpit. I sit in the first row.
Okay.
And young lady came in, and I don't know how she got past the ushers. She didn't mean any harm, but they didn't know that. And she came up front, and she looked at me, and she just started bawling, and she grabbed me.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, so let me sit down and pat you down and pat the grandbaby down. Somebody comes get the baby. Now everybody's right here. So what we've done now is one of the ministers sits right behind me. And the ushers have just been trained to be more alert. So it is a concern. Nothing bad has happened. I'm more concerned, though, about the congregants than I am for myself. So I think it is a matter of concern, but not grave concern.
Okay.
Because we believe God.
That's right.
And God has not given us a spirit of fear.
That's right.
Power, love, and a sound mind. And if we can operate in that place, then everything else. The security before has strictly pertained to the building and the electronics and stuff like that.
Right, exactly.
That's why but now we do have to give some attention to ensuring that our family is safe as well.
Absolutely. Yes or no?
Yes,
Okay.
whenever I'm preaching in the pulpit, I am concerned.
Okay.
And I keep a watchful eye.
Okay. All right. We appreciate your candid responses. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. I think this is absolutely wonderful, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that it will help some people out there. And Chief, we're looking forward to the initiative
Yes.
that you
I'm
will
gonna be
roll
calling
out.
on everybody at this table.
Wonderful, good. Wonderful. Pastor Rule,
Thank you.
Pastor Alexander, Chief Davis, Elder Arnold, Ms. Belinda, thank you all once
You're
again. I
welcome.
really,
Yes.
really appreciate your time and effort.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
There you have it, another edition of Let's Talk. We'll see you next time.